All right, we have made stuff darker and now we need to learn how to make stuff lighter. So for the darker part, we have the burn tool, and for the lighter part, we have the dodge tool. So those are two tools to remember: make things darker with the burn tool and lighter with the dodge tool. So of course, we want to do this again on a new layer, like we did with the burn tool. So we don't affect the original photo. We want to do this on a separate layer so we can always switch it on or off if we want to, and we don't ruin the original photo. So let's start with creating a new layer again. Then go to edit and select fill. And here again, we can select 50% gray. Don't worry about the other stuff here. We don't need it to know that now. Press OK and change the blend mode again to overlay, so we're only seeing what we are doing inside this layer. All right, now we need to select the dodge tool. So you can press right mouse here, select the dodge tool. And here again, we have all these settings like we had with the burn tool. So you can make shadow slider, mid-tone slider, or highlight slider. So for the dodge tool, I usually do like mid-tone slider. I don't do shadow slider. I don't see the point of that. I do usually mid-tone slider or highlight. So let's just start with mid-tones. Let's drop the exposure here a bit. And let's just make something here. This is to try it out, right? And if you press Ctrl Z, you can go back. So I'm just gonna move it a bit around with the mouse to see how it changes. And if we try highlights, it's even lighter. So let's do midtones, maybe a bit more exposure. Let's say 45. I think this is enough. Now I'm gonna zoom in by holding down Alt or Option on Mac and scroll my middle mouse to zoom in on the eyes. And let's make the brush smaller again with these two shortcuts next to the letter P. And I'm gonna do this. So I made the eyes lighter, and you can see how light the eye get. So if I switch this on and off, I made the eye lighter. Let's do the same for the other side. And you can see how nice the eyes look now. Of course, if you're gonna do this too much, it's not gonna look real anymore. If you get the feeling that you did too much of this, you can always just go here and bring the opacity down. So if you want to make your image still look like a real photo instead of too many manipulations, bring the opacity a bit down and try to keep it natural like that. So you can bring it down to maybe around 50-60%. It still looks nice. It will look a bit more natural than when you have 100% like this. It's almost glowing. It all depends on what you want to do with your image. Now, let's move on. For the eyes, I like to keep a separate layer for this because I like to play with the opacity here. So I'm going to create a new layer, then go to Edit, Fill, and again fill this with 50% gray, press OK. Change the blend mode to overlay again. And here I can brush some of this mains, some of his fur lighter. So let's bring the exposure a bit down. I don't want to have it too light, just a bit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to brush some parts lighter. So you can see here this white fur gets even more white. Maybe a bit here on his face. Let's do these fur lines here, there. And you can also do the edge like there. A bit of his ear here, there. And you can see here, if you do too much, it's going to get yellow. Don't do too much, try to keep it natural. And if I compare this before and after, you can see here we are making this side a bit lighter, like that. Let's do a bit here on his face maybe. Oh, that's a bit too much. You can also drop the exposure here, make the brush a bit bigger, and this side will get a bit lighter. And now let's compare this before and after. You can see here we get these nice highlights now on this tiger, before, after. Let's do a bit here. I like these light areas. Maybe a bit more of his ear. And I think this is enough. Let's see it. I would even say this is too much because it gets a bit too much yellowish. So what I'm going to do here is I'm gonna take the opacity and drop this a bit like that. And this is how you make stuff lighter in your image. Some images you can use this a lot more than others. For this one, I wouldn't use it too much because the image is pretty dark already, so we don't need to lighten up this much. So I'm gonna leave it like this, maybe keep it at 50%. And this is how you use the dodge tool. And keep in mind that you can change the range here from midtones to highlights. Sometimes you need to lighten up highlights. For this, midtones is fine.